The harsh echoes of history ring through the ages, telling tales of cruelty and suffering so unimaginable they seem like something born of nightmares. In this twisted theater of punishment, human beings were subjected to unspeakable fates, enduring agony beyond comprehension. Today, we venture into the shadows of time, where a civilization's darkest desires were brought to life in a series of torturous rituals. In an era when the mere act of defying authority was met with death, and human life held little value, these punishments served as chilling reminders of the power wielded by rulers and the depths of cruelty humanity is capable of. The screams of the damned still reverberate through time, their stories untold, their pain never forgotten. Let us step into this world of darkness, where every punishment was more grotesque than the last, each more harrowing, each more brutal, where death was not a release but a prolonged nightmare. We begin our journey with a punishment so terrifying that it haunts the minds of those who hear it: the Roman method of execution known as pena coeli. Pena coeli. Pena coeli. The execution of parasite ancient Rome, a city of unparalleled grandeur and power, was also a land of terrifying punishments. Within its walls, crimes were met with agonies that no human should ever endure, and no punishment was more horrendous than the execution of those who dared commit parricide, the murder of one's own parent or parents. To kill one's own flesh and blood was regarded as the ultimate betrayal, a sin so grave that it demanded not just death but a punishment beyond imagination. For these accursed souls, the terrifying ritual of pena coeli awaited them. The condemned would begin their journey into hell with a brutal flogging, their backs torn open by merciless lashes. This was only the beginning. The ritual would continue with a wolfskin bag placed over their head, an instrument not just of blindness but of utter helplessness. The weight of their guilt, symbolized by the suffocating darkness, was now upon them. Then their feet would be forced into wooden clogsage, a painful reminder of the suffering that awaited them. But the true horror lay in what came next. The condemned was then bound tightly within a leather sack, their limbs contorted in unnatural ways. Inside, a menagerie of creatures: a dog, a rooster, a snake, and a monkey wait, not as companions, but as instruments of further suffering. Together, they were cast into the waters, their fate sealed as the black oxen dragged them to the edge. With a final, desperate plunge, they were drowned. The animals, frantic in the darkness of the sack, would only add to the horror, their claws and teeth a final testament to the inescapable agony. Yet, despite its gruesome nature, pena coeli was a rare punishment. It was reserved only for those who admitted their guilt, those who confessed to their horrific crime. The punishment was so extreme that by 118 CE, Emperor Hadrian allowed for a substitution, being thrown to wild beasts. By the 3rd century, this method of execution was no longer used, but the terrifying legacy of pena coeli lived on in the darkest corners of Roman history. Drawing and quartering, the execution of treasoners, we step from one nightmare into another. We find ourselves in the blood-soaked fields of 13th century England. Here, the crime of treason was met with one of the most brutal forms of execution ever devised: drawing and quartering. This horrifying process began with the condemned being drawn to the gallows, their body torn and broken by the unforgiving motion of a horse dragging them across the ground. The sight of the accused, stripped of dignity, dragged through the streets, was not just a punishment but a spectacle for all to witness. As they neared their doom, their suffering only intensified. Those condemned to this gruesome fate were often subjected to to disembowelment or decapitation, each part of their body mutilated to further punctuate the horror. But the true savagery lay in the final step, the quartering. The victim's limbs were bound to 4 separate horses, each urged to run in opposite directions. The result was a grotesque and horrifying display of dismemberment. The public display of body parts, scattered across the city, was not just a reminder of the crime, but a brutal warning to all who dared defy the state. The gruesome nature of this punishment cannot be overstated. It was not just about death. It was about pain, suffering, and an unrelenting terror that would echo in the minds of those who witnessed it for generations. Linky, the death by 1,000 cuts in the East. Another cruel form of execution was practiced, one that would stretch out the agony of death for hours, if not days. Known as Linky, or the death by 1,000 cuts. This method was a slow and agonizing descent into death, originating in China. Linky was reserved for the most heinous criminals, those who had committed grave crimes against the emperor or the state. The condemned were tied to a post, exposed to the public gaze, and then subjected to a prolonged and excruciating process. Each cut was precise, each slice of the knife designed to prolong the victim's agony. As pieces of flesh and skin were torn from their body, the torment would continue until, finally, the heart or the head was severed, ending the suffering. But the true horror lay not just in the pain of the cuts, but in the realization that this suffering could last for hours, with the victim fully conscious of their impending death. The ritual was a grotesque spectacle, one that symbolized the power of the emperor over life and death. Cropping of ears, the mark of shaman, some parts of the world. Punishment was not just about death, but about leaving a permanent mark, both physical and psychological, on the condemned. One such brutal punishment was the cropping of ears, a public shaming that left lasting scars. The victim's ears would be severed, often without anesthesia or mercy. For less severe cases, a variation of the punishment involved nailing the victim's ears to a pillory, leaving them exposed for public humiliation. While it didn't always end in death, the consequences of this punishment were no less severe. Infections from the wounds could lead to a slow, agonizing death. But the real damage was in the psychological toll, the shame of being marked for life. Death by boiling, the fiery, tormenting the early centuries of the Common Era. Death by boiling became a method of execution that transcended its gruesome origins as a punishment for criminals and evolved into something more sinister. The condemned was stripped of their dignity and lowered into a cauldron filled with boiling liquid. Whether it be water, oil, or even tar, the liquid would first be cool, but slowly the temperature would rise. Each degree an unbearable torment. The victim was trapped in a slow, agonizing death as the temperature of the liquid increased, cooking them alive. Some would endure this nightmare for hours, their screams muffled by the thick, suffocating heat. It was a horrifying fate reserved for those whose crimes were deemed unforgivable, and it was one of the most brutal forms of execution in medieval England and beyond. The saw, a slow dismemberment in the Roman Empire, Spain, and parts of Asia, a particularly brutal method of execution known as the sawing took place. This method was designed to slowly and painfully tear apart the victim, both physically and psychologically. The condemned would be hung upside down, a slow dissection of their body being carried out in front of a watching crowd. Their internal organs would be removed piece by piece, the process excruciatingly slow and methodical in the end. It wasn't just the physical pain that broke the victim. but the horrifying realization that they were no longer in control of their body, that their fate was sealed by a cruel and unforgiving system of punishment, crushed under an elephant. The power of beasts in ancient India and Southeast Asia. Elephant screeches of great strength and power were used as instruments of death. The condemned would be placed beneath the massive feet of these trained animals, their enormous weight crushing them underfoot. In some cases, the elephants were trained to prolong the agony, allowing the victim to suffer for longer, a slow, agonizing death that could last for hours. These brutal executions were often carried out in public, a spectacle meant to remind the people of the ruler's absolute power. The brazen bull, roasted alive in the 6th century BCE. A particularly horrifying invention emerged from the mind of a cruel tyrant. The brazen bull, a hollowed-out bronze statue, was designed as an instrument of death that could roast its victims alive. The condemned would be locked inside the bull, and a fire would be set beneath it, heating the metal until it was scorching hot. The screams of the victim would echo through the hollow bull. The sound of agony transformed into something that resembled the bellowing of a bull itself. This was a punishment not just for death, but for suffering a device that symbolized the depravity of the human mind. Even its creator, the inventor Parellos, would meet a tragic fate, locked inside the very bull he had made. In ancient Rome, the Vestal Virgins were not just priestesses, but sacred symbols of purity, guardians of Rome's spiritual health. These women pledged an unwavering vow of chastity, swearing to serve the goddess Vesta and protect the eternal flame of the city. Their role was vital. Their sacrifice meant to safeguard the very soul of the empire. But in a city where power and devotion intertwined, the cost of breaking that sacred vow was unspeakably brutal. To betray the goddess, to break the sacred oath of chastity, was to defy the gods themselves. The punishment for such an act was one of the most harrowing and unimaginable forms of execution ever devised. Rather than a quick death, the condemned Vestal Virgin was paraded through the city, her disgrace becoming public knowledge. The weight of her sin symbolized by the crowd's jeering gaze. But this was just the beginning. She was then led to a small chamber at the Colline Gate, a forsaken place where death waited. Not in the form of a blade, but in the suffocating embrace of the earth itself. Here, she would be locked inside a tumor crypt of eternal isolation, left with nothing but a dim light and a meager ration of food. Slowly, the air would grow thick, and her body would wither in darkness until death took her. This punishment, though not frequently carried out, was a terrifying reminder of the cost of betrayal. The punishment for defiling the sacred oath of chastity was one of the slowest and most chilling forms of death, reserved only for those who dared to challenge the gods. Scaphism, the slow death in the boat of doom we now, turned to one of the most grotesque and debated methods of execution, a punishment so terrible that it almost defies belief. A method used by the ancient Persians, it was a punishment so horrific it has become legendary, though its authenticity is still debated by historians. In this vile execution, the victim was trapped in a boat-like vessel, with holes carved for their head, hands, and feet to protrude. The wretched soul was then force-fed a mixture of milk and honey, their body coated with the same sticky substance. The victim was left helpless, exposed to the horrors of nature, as flies and insects descended upon them, as the body festered and began to rot. The victim would slowly succumb to the torment, left to drown in their own filth, their skin eaten away by relentless insects. The process was agonizingly slow, taking days, and sometimes even weeks, to claim its victim. Those who were subjected to scaphism endured an excruciating, drawn-out death, a fate so grotesque it's often considered more psychological than physical. One recorded account tells of a soldier named Myth, whose execution by this method lasted 17 days. The sheer horror of this punishment leaves a mark on history, a chilling reminder of the cruelty that can be inflicted when power is unchecked. The wheel, a sinister dance of death. The wheel, also known as the breaking wheel, was an instrument of torment that carried the condemned through a nightmarish journey of pain and suffering. This cruel device was designed not just to kill, but to destroy the human body in the most excruciating way imaginable. The victim would be bound to a large wooden wheel, their limbs shattered and pulverized by the cruel hands of the executioners. Each bone would be broken, each joint dislocated, leaving the victim writhing in agony. The broken body would be displayed, a grotesque trophy meant to send a message to the public: defy authority, and this will be your fate. After the initial destruction of the body, the victim was often left on the wheel to die slowly, their blood pooling beneath them as they were left to rot. In some cases, they would be left in this agonizing position for days, their body exposed to the elements, their suffering an eternal symbol of the cruelty of the ruling power. The wheel was not just an execution device. It was a statement, a public spectacle meant to instill fear in the hearts of all who watched. A cruel, lingering death, not just to the body, but to the spirit as well. Impalement, a grisly penetration into darkness. Few forms of punishment are as universally horrific as impalement. This brutal method of execution was used across several ancient civilizations, from Persia to the Ottoman Empire, and its terror rippled through history, staining the pages of the past with its cruelty. The victim would be slowly and painfully impaled on a sharp stake, either vertically or horizontally. In some cases, the stake would pass through the body, sparing vital organs but causing unimaginable agony as the victim's body was pierced from within. The suffering would last for days as the victim, still alive, hung from the stake, their body racked with pain and slowly succumbing to blood loss and infection. This brutal practice was used not just to kill, but to send a message. It was a warning to all who might defy the rulers of the land. Impalement was a gruesome punishment used to break the spirit and crush any hope of escape from the unyielding hand of power, the blood eagle unfurling wings of death. The darkest and most terrifying of Viking tortures is the mythic ritual known as the blood eagle, though its authenticity has been debated. The chilling image of the blood eagle is one that has burned itself into the annals of history. The condemned victim would be laid upon the ground, their back sliced open with brutal precision. The ribs would be separated from the spine, and their lungs would be drawn out, stretched and unfurled in a grisly mockery of wings that could only flutter in death. The agony of this ritual was unmatched, as the victim's lungs, exposed and torn, would gasp for air, trapped in a living nightmare. The slow suffocation would take hours, as the victim's body was transformed into a grotesque symbol of death and despair. This terrifying execution was purportedly reserved for traitors and enemies of the Vikings. But the sheer brutality of the blood eagle speaks volumes about the savagery of the time. Whether real or imagined, the legend endures, a haunting reminder of the depths of human cruelty. Molten gold, the death of wealth and desire, and some of the most cruel and gruesome executions. Molten gold was used as a means of both punishment and symbolic retribution. For the victims of this horrifying fate, their death was not just physical but deeply symbolic, punishing them for greed and gluttony, or simply for the sins of power. The condemned would be forced to drink molten gold, the scalding liquid entering their body through their mouth, searing their insides and burning them from the inside out. The body would writhe in agony as internal organs were cooked by the molten metal. A fiery death that would quickly end the victim's life in a way that no other form of execution could. This form of death was particularly prevalent in the Roman Empire, where it was used to punish those who had dared to accumulate wealth through dishonest means. It was a punishment that left the victim not just dead but obliterated, consumed by the very element they sought to control, flaying, the painful stripping of skin flaying. One of the most excruciating forms of torture and execution involved the slow and painful removal of a victim's skin. This brutal practice was used throughout history, especially by the Assyrians, and its terror echoed across cultures. The victim would be strapped down, their limbs immobilized, as the executioner began the gruesome task of peeling away their skin. Starting from the head and working downward, the process was agonizingly slow, leaving the victim fully conscious and aware of each excruciating cut. Flaying was not just a form of punishment. It was a means of terrorizing entire populations. To flay a person was to strip them of their humanity, leaving them nothing more than a bloody carcass, a symbol of the ultimate power of the rulers. As we close this chapter of history's darkest punishments, we are left with the chilling realization that these brutal acts were not mere stories, they were real. The pain, the suffering, the death, it all happened. In a world where cruelty reigned and human life was measured in terms of power and control, these methods of punishment serve as a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty. A warning that no matter how far we have come, the darkness of our past can never be truly erased. As we bid farewell to this horrifying journey, let us remember that history, no matter how distant, will always have its shadows. And within those shadows lie the stories of those who endured the unimaginable, their pain still echoing through the ages. Thank you for joining us in this exploration of history's most brutal punishments. We hope this haunting tale has left an indelible mark on your mind and heart. Stay tuned for more chilling stories from the past.